The Field of 68 Media Network presents Red is the New Orange, a Syracuse basketball podcast.
Vince intercepts a pass, breakaway for the freshman guard, he flies and slams! Aerial assault from Judah Mintz.
Looking to go back door to Bell, they get it to a near corner three, knocks it down! Chris Bell, the sharpshooter.
Bringing you everything you need to know out of the 315.
Up top, Williams surges ahead, up with the right hand and in. A pretty up and under move from Benny Williams to beat his man.
Over to Taylor, he skips into the lane, puts up a floater, and drops in.
Let's get it started with your host, Ian Unsworth and Johnny Gadamowitz.
Well, the Maui Invitational was not a memorable one for Syracuse fans. The Orange go 1-2. The only win is over Chaminade, and we were left with more questions than answers. Welcome into Red is the New Orange. Ian Unsworth, Johnny Gadamowitz with you as always. Follow us, F68_Cuse on Twitter. Drop the YouTube a subscription, a follow. You can check out every single Field of 68 team podcast right there, whether it's UNC, whether it's Kentucky, whether you want to figure out what the heck's going on at Louisville, UCLA, you name it, they got it. And also give the Field of 68 a follow for After Dark. Every single night, Rob Doster, Jeff Goodman, the guys break down the biggest storylines from the night of college basketball. So definitely worth giving those a follow. And of course, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Johnny, back to Maui. The only win over Chaminade. 2 double-digit losses to teams that are probably top 10 when the season is said and done. Disappointing. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how disappointed are you? Because you were the guy that said Syracuse could crack one of these nuts and win one of these big early season games.
Yeah, I'm disappointed, and it's not to say that it isn't what I expected. I won't lie. When you hit the halftime of that Tennessee game, I was feeling pretty good, right? You're down 5. You find a way to sort of neutralize that Volunteers offense, at least for 20 minutes. And then the second half was what it was. Connect shot the lights out. Tennessee flexed its muscles, and Syracuse continues to prove that it can't put together a full 40. I think for me, the biggest disappointment, and you mentioned, having more.
Okay, enough about that. Give me a number, Johnny. Give me a number. Stop all this pontificating.
I know. I'm putting it off. Meaning 10 is as disappointing.
10 is like kicking and screaming, throwing stuff, and 1 is like no. Like 1 is sitting here. I'd say
a 6.5. I think 6.5 is where I'm at. I'm not pressing the panic button, but at the same time, would have liked to see a little more life.
I agree. Let me take a drink from the old water bottle here.
Listen, I will say nice to end on a win, obviously, but at the same token,
the win doesn't mean anything. You're playing a school that's not D1 competition, right? It's clearly there for ceremonial purposes. You need a host school, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
I will say, having the tournament at the University of Hawaii instead of the Lahaina Civic Center didn't seem to lose any of the feel, which I really appreciated. Watching the Maui Invitational in years past, you look at the small gym, the shots of the beach, right? Everyone is so into it. The gym is so cozy, and it feels like you're watching a high school game. The University of Hawaii kind of felt like a step up, right, size-wise. But other than that, it was still the same. Bill Walton's still a nut job. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. But it still felt like November tournament basketball. And if you also watch the rest of the tournament, I mean, it was fantastic. We probably saw a couple of Elite 8, maybe even Final 4 previews. And it's not bad for Syracuse to test your mettle against a Final 4 team, which Tennessee could easily be. Gonzaga's probably not a Final 4 team, but at least
they looked pretty darn good this week.
At least they're going to make the tournament and probably make it to the second weekend.
Right.
So kind of let's get into the nuts and bolts here. With Tennessee, you kind of ran through it before I pinned you down on a number here. But the game was at 6. deep in the second half.
Yeah.
Connect us down with that lower body injury. And things just fall sideways. The full 40 minutes is the big struggle for this team.
And they haven't shown it yet, Ian, right? I think look, they held them to what? I think it was 33% shooting in half number one. I think the defense was what I really was proud of. I'll even go as far to say in that first half, right? The ability to go out, know that, okay, we know we're going up against stiff top competition. We know we haven't seen a team like this yet. And to come out of the gate in the way that they did, and not even just out of the gate, you mentioned it too. It was close second half as well. When the wheels fell off, though, I think it was something that both you and I probably felt was inevitable at some point in that game. It was a matter of when, not if. It's the sort of thing where, again, in November, you can afford for that to happen, right? I'd rather address those issues now so that come January and February, you know what you're doing and you don't have those utter collapses down the home stretch.
Speaking of addressing the issues, let's talk about this Benny thing for a second.
Yeah.
What in the world is going on?
I think moving forward, we have to operate under the assumption that he is a net zero, right? Not necessarily holding anybody back and not hurting the overall product, but also not helping it either. Right. And as we get into some of our Gonzaga discussion, I'll implement this point even more. But I think with Benny, until he proves that he has something to offer and he has a tangible role on this team, and look, he's not going to figure that out overnight, right? The only way to figure out the larger piece of the puzzle that he is to kind of play the long game with it, which stinks. Because for whatever reason, the program right now seems a little hesitant to play that long game. But I think, you want to call him an X factor? Sure. Could he unlock a level of offensive and defensive prowess that we haven't seen from this group yet? Potentially. But until he gives us any reason to believe it, I almost want to continue to have these conversations as if he's out of the picture, because frankly, Ian, that's kind of what
he was. Like.
Right.
He just sat on the bench in a freaking tank top,
right,
against Gonzaga. Like, there's got to be something else going on, whether there's some sort of practice or there's some sort of discussions between Benny and a coach or whatever it may be. But there's no reason to play the dude 16 minutes one game and then not play him at all against Gonzaga, unless there's other stuff going on. So there's got to be other stuff going on.
Yeah,
because
I think that's the only logical conclusion that we could sort of arrive at, which is puzzling. I think, put it this way, if this guy wanted out, I think he's had every opportunity, right? Yeah. I mean, he has vocally expressed his commitment to Syracuse University in the past, right? I don't think it's a matter of him not wanting it. Just got to be something from a behind the scenes standpoint that is preventing him from living out to his fullest potential.
Just disappointing.
Yeah.
We know he can give Syracuse 15, 16 points if it really comes down to it. And there are times, especially against these better teams, when Syracuse looks incapable of scoring the ball. Against Tennessee, Chris Bell is smoking hot in the first half.
Yep.
He can't miss. And then he falls off the wagon inevitably. I mean, that's like, you just can't expect a shooter to stay hot for 40 minutes, especially when most of, or if not all of Bell's shots are hand in the face, right? One dribble. Oh, hey, defender, I'm going to shoot it over. Like, every single shot he takes is contested.
I will say
they're all super difficult.
He reeled me in a little bit. Like, I fell for it in the sense that, okay, you think about the game he had against Colgate, right? To turn around and do it one game later against a top 10 team. I don't know if he's pieced together three halves like that during the entirety of his Syracuse career. So yes, obviously he was bound to fall off the cliff at some point.
Well, yeah, the
It was
wheels
sort of,
fell off the bus
they did.
against
They
Gonzaga.
did. But I was sitting at the edge of my seat thinking, oh my God, hang on. Are we seeing a little bit of consistency here? And that was fool's gold, right? Because all you got to do is watch the kind of shots he takes, and you know that the consistency just isn't there. But not only to have him, struggle down the home stretch of the Tennessee game, but then even in the Gonzaga game too, which I know you were just alluding to. What did he go? 1 for 10 from range,
Yeah,
2 of
for
18 from the field. I mean, that's inexplicable. Well, I shouldn't say it's inexplicable because he's going to have his peaks and valleys, but got to be more of a one-dimensional guy, right? Or more than a one-dimensional guy, I should say, especially on a game where Justin Taylor gives you nothing either, right? And this goes back to the larger Benny point. And this was really, if you're going to take anything away from this podcast, I think it's this. For me, the Gonzaga game is sort of what this team's ceiling can be without a third scorer developing, right? Judah can only do so much. JJ can only do so much. And they each have their flaws. They didn't play perfect games by any stretch. But at some point, I mean, Ian, you look around the country, you got to sort of have that third guy. And this team has 3 or 4 guys, I think, that could be that third guy, right? But here we are now, it's not game 2 anymore. It's not game 3. We've got enough of a sample size to sort of pick at here where, you asked me about my disappointment before. That's where most of it kind of lies. The fact that guy, whoever it might be, Bell, Taylor, Benny, has yet to emerge.
But before we get full on into the Gonzaga game, let's get a quick word from Rob Doster and our friends at BetMGM.
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook for this college basketball season. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks and predictions throughout the college basketball season. And we are going to have special offers for you, the listeners and the viewers on the Field of 68 each and every week during the season. If you haven't signed up with BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FIELD1500 and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager on BetMGM Sportsbook. Here's what you got to do. Download the BetMGM app. Sign up using the bonus code FIELD1500. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if that bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FIELD1500 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available under one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient for me when I have to go cover games in New York or Philly. When crossing state borders, just log into your existing account instead of having to create new accounts in each state that you go to. And most importantly, I got to let you know, we do have some fun stuff coming up for this college basketball season. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boosts, my personal favorite, parlay odds boosts. So download the BetMGM app today.
All right, back to Gonzaga. The Tennessee game, Syracuse was around. The first half was very close. It felt like the Orange had a chance until the Volunteers widened the gap at the end. Gonzaga, on the other hand, it felt like the Orange were trying to catch a runaway train. The Bulldogs play fast. They've always been a pacey team. We said it was sort of a new era, right, Johnny? I think that's the phrase you used. New era, different Gonzaga team, but same sort of style that Mark Few's been using year after year. What really impressed me the most about Gonzaga, 4 different players in double figures, was how well they passed the basketball.
Dude, they moved the ball. And that's what we've been wanting from a Syracuse standpoint for years. I wrote it down here as well. 17 assists on 30 made buckets. When was the last time Syracuse had numbers like that? The flow. It's like, I don't know, to draw the NBA comp, the San Antonio Spurs teams of years past during that dynasty where you just watch and it's good basketball, right? It's finding the open guy. It's swinging it around the perimeter. It's not relying on ISO ball. I think Syracuse can learn a thing or two from that Gonzaga game, watching the Zags play offense.
Once Gonzaga got the ball inside, Syracuse got totally discombobulated. They were flipping it back and forth, interior passing from block to block, whether that's big to big, Huff to Ike, or Nembhard getting inside, laying it off to Anton Watson. They found so many different ways to confuse Syracuse's man-to-man defense. We talked about the pick and roll a lot. Syracuse can't defend the pick and roll. Well, when you're playing against a guard who is better than you, he doesn't need a pick and roll. He can get to the hole by himself. And that's what Nembhard did. That's what Nolan Hickman did. That's what these guys did. They just went at Syracuse's man-to-man. They were not afraid. And it really helps when you get the ball inside. You get people out of position. Because even if you miss, Gonzaga had 25 second chance points. They scored 79. You take those first shots away, it's a one-possession game. So, with all that being said, there's still a long way to go for Syracuse's defense. And it showed that there are many more steps to take. It doesn't matter if Judah gets you 25 points. If you can't stop anyone, and if you're a leaky faucet on defense, there's not a whole lot your offense can really do running with a team that likes to run. You can't beat them at your own game.
Especially because we hear all the time how athletic this Syracuse team is supposed to be, and the fact that,
different from last year,
different from last year, teams are going to have a tough time cracking that man-to-man defense. Gonzaga did it easily. And I think, the interior defense for me is what really leaves a lot to be desired here, Ian, right? I mean, Naheem McLeod's struggles have been well documented. I just think, 3 minutes out of Munir Hima, obviously he was a non-factor in that.
I'm glad he saw the floor.
I am glad he saw the floor.
His warm-ups off and
keep those legs fresh. Keep those legs fresh. But this, I don't know. I mean, as much as you like the perimeter defense, and is capable of defenders,
you like the idea of the perimeter defense,
right?
I don't know if it's actually there yet.
When you get a team that's zipping the ball around like nobody's business and just finding the holes in the way that Gonzaga did, and for me, what's frustrating was, I think against Colgate, that's sort of the approach we expected the Raiders to take, a little bit of a different look, but kind of falling under the same umbrella, if you will. And Syracuse looked prepared for the task. The difference, obviously, is Colgate and Gonzaga, two different programs in terms of the type of guys they're bringing to the table.
The other thing, you have to split your scout 50-50 between Gonzaga, who's going to run up and down, play super fast,
and the exact opposite, right?
Who's toting around a 7'4", probably taller big guy who's the best player in the country. And all they have to do is throw it into him 20 times, 30 times a game. And if you watched any of that Purdue-Tennessee game, Edey got fouled probably 25 times in the second half. There were 70-something combined free throws.
Yeah, why would you watch any of that game, dude? That hurt my eyes.
Terrible product.
You bring up a good point, though, and I want to ask you this here. How much slack are you willing to get? I don't know if giving them slack is the right way to phrase it, but like considering, okay, 2 really tough games, back-to-back days, you don't know who your opponent on day 2 is going to be until the last minute. Like, it not an excuse, but is that worthy of kind of being factored into the conversation, you think?
I would think so.
Yeah.
It's tough to really have a great idea on what you're getting into when you play 2 teams that you have no business playing, other than the fact that it's a multi-team event.
Right.
At the same time, if Syracuse has any chance of making the NCAA tournament, and as people seem to be floating out, there are people on Twitter who have this idea that Syracuse is one of those teams that's really going to make a push for the NCAA tournament. I would love to see it. I'm super excited, but I'm also a glass half empty guy whenever it comes to anything Syracuse sports. So I'll be self-aware here. Could Syracuse be a tournament team? Yeah. Are we seeing it yet? I don't think so. And it's not just like, it's not them playing the Gonzagas and the Tennessees of the world. It's them looking a little sus against New Hampshire and Colgate. Like,
well, I don't know, man. I mean, were you watching any of Duke, Southern Indiana? Indiana was what, up at the break?
Our friend Brad Klein on the call. I'm sure he got a great game.
I mean, the ACC is not knocking my shoes off. I'll tell you that much. I know, obviously, it falls more on Syracuse.
UNC was getting tested by Northern Iowa.
Right.
Who knows? So everybody hasn't looked great. there's not one team in college basketball per se that looks like world beaters right now. But at the same time, there are other teams that have problems that are fixable, while Syracuse is still learning on the job. You know what I mean? Say you got a job working at, your local grocery store. You don't know how to do everything properly until 3 weeks in. It's like on day one, they threw you behind the butcher counter. Johnny, if some grandma walks in and she asks you, "Hey son, can I get four steaks?" They're not going to give you the cow and say, "Go ahead." So that's kind of what Syracuse is doing right now. Syracuse has the cow, and they're trying to figure out how to carve out those steaks.
And my biggest worry is that those problems, not that they won't be fixed, but I think this is where Syracuse is different than a lot of other teams. I think more of their problems lie on the construction of the roster almost, rather than they are who they are in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're only going to get so much out of your big men when Naheem McLeod is the only guy that's seeing real minutes out of your big men. Right. So I think they're playing with a little bit of an altered mindset because they really have to tier their game plan and their strengths towards what they kind of have and what the makeup of this team is. That's not to say there's not a way to do it, but as you alluded to, Ian, it's going to take some time.
My last thought on this, when you have McLeod struggle and you have Malik Brown as the backup 5,
right,
you're going to be putting a lot of those tough positions against faster teams, bigger teams. And Malik Brown's just not meant to play the 5. That's not going to work. But you don't have multiple fillets on this team, to kind of go back to the steak thing. You got one fillet on this team, and that's Judah Mintz. Other than that, like
any strip steaks? Any strip steaks? New York strip?
I mean, Chris Bell looked like a strip steak. You get the point. There's not enough consistency yet.
Yeah.
And that's why when you brought up the point early on about this team has to make a splash or they'll win, I wasn't with it, because there's just a long way for the team to go.
And all you got to do is look at the rebounding battle, right? Minus 35 between Tennessee and Gonzaga combined. Minus 35 on the boards.
And they're still coaching. There's coached that out of last year. You got to get rid of those, those bad habits. And Syracuse still has a long way to go. Johnny, anything else before we wrap it up?
Well, I will say this, Ian. I mean, during our preseason talks, you really honed in on some of these next few games, right? I mean, LSU coming up, ACC, SEC Challenge. You get a date with Oregon coming up in mid-December as well. Georgetown sprinkled in there, a gritty Cornell squad out of the Ivy League. Buckle up. It's going to be a fun next couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm sure Cornell is rather gritty, and it's a bunch of high IQ coaches' sons going on up there. Thank you for that, Johnny. Oregon just lost its 2 best big men. We'll put that out there, and we will have in-depth previews of both LSU and Oregon with one of our former roommates, John Eads, who's now doing the good work down there in Shreveport, and then one of my best friends from childhood, Shane Hoffman, who covers the Oregon Ducks football and men's basketball team. So keep an eye out for that episode with Jeeds, as we call him. Should be dropping Monday, normal time. Yes, we were a little bit behind today, but Thanksgiving is Thanksgiving
week.
Things move a little bit slower when you've got the tryptophan. Is that what it's called? Whatever the turkey chemical is.
I
when
think
it's
so.
Flowing through your veins, things go a little bit slower.
And it stays in the system for a couple days after, too.
Yeah, that's why I slept so late today. So, with Johnny Gwitz, I'm Ian Unsworth. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, drop us a follow, F68_Cuse, and follow the Field of 68 as well on both Twitter and YouTube. Check out all the other team pods after dark as well. And you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We hope Syracuse beats Wake Forest today and gets football bowl eligibility, but at the same time, it's a new era for Syracuse football, and that is that. Neither of us thought Dino would go, but he's gone.
Conversation for another day.
Exactly. So, hope you have a great weekend.